Live, local. This is Fox 12 Now.
Hello, everyone. This is Fox 12 Now. I'm Greg Nibbler. There is a live shot from Seaside right now out there on the Oregon coast, and it looks amazing. And I would like to be out there on that beach, but somewhere far off into that ocean, around 300 miles away, there lies an underwater volcano that we are going to be talking about during this segment. Again, this is Fox 12 Now. Our guests are going to be with us here just a second. We are live streaming out of the Fox 12 Oregon newsroom, so thanks for being here. And this is a live show, and so we appreciate you joining in, whether you're watching live or not. You can always watch afterward on our Fox 12 Oregon YouTube channel, KPTV.com, or the Fox 12 Oregon apps. But the Axial Seamount is that volcano that I was referencing off of the Oregon coast. And there is a prediction that it could erupt in 2025. We're going to talk about that prediction, how that went about, and to do so, we have two of the lead researchers joining us right now, Bill Chadwick and Scott Noonen. Bill and Scott, thank you very much for having time to join us. This has been a topic of discussion for us here on the show. We've done a couple of interviews and segments about this, but now we have you two on here to really get down to the bottom of this. But we like to educate everybody and give a little bit of context and understanding in case they don't know. So to start off, could we just talk about the Axial Seamount and explain what this is and give a little bit of a context as far as where this is located off of the Oregon coast?
Sure. So I'm Bill Chadwick at Oregon State University. So Axial Seamount is, like you said, it's located about 300 miles offshore, kind of due west of Astoria, more or less. There it is, yeah. And it's on the Juan de Fuca Ridge, which is a place where two plates are spreading apart. So that's kind of where it's situated out there, or why it's situated out there. And it's a volcano that's similar in behavior to the volcanoes in Hawaii or Iceland. So it erupts fluid lava flows. It doesn't explode like the Cascade volcanoes. So I first of all want to reassure everybody that the eruptions out at this volcano don't have any impact on humans anywhere, really, unless you were down there on the seafloor too close to the action. So people along the coast don't have to worry about tsunamis. There's lots of, when it erupts, there's lots of little earthquakes, but they have no activity out at Axial will have no effect on the Cascadia subduction zone closer to shore, where we worry about the big earthquakes that can happen. So there's no real hazard from activity at Axial, and because it's too deep, it's too far away. It's the top of Axial's almost a mile deep. So if you were out on a boat right over the seamount while it was erupting, you probably wouldn't even know it unless you dangled a hydrophone over the side and were listening for the activity down in the deep. So that's my introduction to Axial.
Yeah, and I think that's important to address too, because we have seen a lot of those comments from people, like, is this going to cause, and what you just addressed, is it going to cause a tsunami? No. Is it, are you even going to really feel or know anything from on land? No, and I think that's a good reference right there, is just being right above it, even in a boat or a ship, you probably wouldn't even know it was erupting. But the really big thing here is, it being located at those plates and some of the scientific data that you've been able to gather throughout your research on this. And can we go into that side of it and just talk about how this volcano in particular, located a mile down, 300 some miles off the coast, is actually getting some pretty amazing data. We're able to get some pretty amazing data from it.
Yeah, Scott, why don't you go ahead?
So we actually there's been researchers collecting data at Axial Seamount since the 1990s. And we first saw an eruption in 1998, and that led to us investing more time and energy and money into trying to study the volcano. And we have steadily been increasing the number of instruments that we have out there for monitoring over the last over 25 years. We've seen another eruption in 2011, and then a third eruption in 2015. And so all that time, we've learned about the eruption process. We've observed now 2 full cycles of an eruption, and that's allowed us, as we've continued to put more and more instruments out and gather more data, that's allowed us to build some models about how we think the volcano operates over time. There's a cabled observatory out there now that went online in late 2014, early 2015. So we actually captured some of the eruption in 2015 with that cabled observatory. So it's really a combination of us going out there every few years, collecting data with various instruments that we use, plus the cabled observatory now that allows us to have a pretty good idea of what's happening down there.
And this is one of the most, from what I understand, one of the most researched volcanoes, at least underwater volcanoes in the world. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, especially because of that cable that goes out there. It goes from Pacific City all the way out to the seamount offshore, and it's got a bunch of monitoring instruments plugged into it, and it's really has made this place a state-of-the-art observatory. And it was the fact that it had erupted, several times already, and we know it's a really active place, and that makes it a great place to study. So, it's not the hazard to humans that gets us out there. It's that it's a very active volcano, and for those of us that study how volcanoes work, it's great to be able to study a site that's almost continuously active. It's always doing something. The volcanoes on land, thank goodness, are slumbering most of the time. We don't want them to be active all the time, but this place is really active, so we can study what's happening all the time. And it turns out it's got this pretty repetitive behavior. It as magma is entering beneath the volcano and stored inside, it actually swells. It inflates a bit like a balloon. We can measure that movement, up and down movement of the seafloor, and that's kind of what we're basing our forecasting on. Is that so it slowly inflates, and then it erupts, and the seafloor drops back down as the magma is erupted on the seafloor, and it seems to erupt at about the same level of inflation each time, from what we can tell. So that's what this forecast is based on. We're almost at the level it was at before the 2015 eruption. And there's starting to be more and more earthquakes that are also detected with this cable observatory. And so it's starting to look like the buildup to the last eruption. And so that's what we're trying to do. It's basically an experiment to see if the volcano's behavior is actually repeatable enough to do this kind of long-term forecasting, which is very difficult to do on land. For one thing, you don't want to be issuing false alarms and getting people freaked out. Out at Axial, we don't really have to worry about there's no humans living around it, so we're kind of free to make this kind of forecast without worrying about any negative consequences. But it's also, if we can make this kind of longer term forecast here, then there's maybe lessons that can be applied to other more dangerous volcanoes around the world. So that's the goal here.
Yeah, so taking all of this and, as you mentioned, applying it to other volcanoes, and again, to reiterate too, this one is not a danger, and I know you've said it many times on here. I do have some examples too, from some of the ways that you observe this. So you mentioned there's the cable array that is out there, but there's also these underwater remotely operated vehicles that you have as well that can provide a lot of info. And I'm assuming, looking at this, if you could walk us through this, is that what we're looking at right now?
Yeah, so this is video from a remotely operated vehicle called Jason. This is, we're looking at the edge of the 2011 lava flow right after we discovered it. So this is video from 2011, right after that eruption. And that's the mechanical arm of the ROV that's going to be grabbing a little piece of that new lava flow so we can analyze it for its chemistry and so forth. Yeah, so we go out there every couple of years and deploy and recover a lot of instruments that supplement this cabled observatory. And yeah, once in a while like this, we find out that it had just erupted.
And looking at here, so you mentioned, leaving from Astoria, but there's an example from earlier this year. So this is the ship that goes out. They assume Jason. I like that it's named. I'm assuming that's an acronym, but I just like that you just named it Jason. But yeah, taking a look at just how this research goes and what it is that goes into this. There's just a tremendous amount that happens for this. And how often do you go out there in a ship to observe the seamount?
Yeah, we've been going out there every 2 years recently. So this is from our most recent expedition this past June. This is kind of a summary video that was made describing what all we were doing out there. It's online at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute website, I think. But Scott, you can kind of describe some of this.
Describe what we're seeing, or
or the pressure measurements maybe, or
just what it is that you're doing when you're heading out there.
we do a variety of things, but one of the main things, sort of the cornerstone of what our research has been over the last 25 years, has been measuring water pressure at the bottom of the seafloor and tracking how that changes over time. And the idea behind that is that as the volcano surface swells or drops, whether it's inflating or there's an eruption that causes the volcano to deflate, that has a corresponding change in water pressure, because the height of the water above the volcano changes as the surface of the volcano is changing. So we measure we have very precise measurements of the water pressure that we then use to determine what the depth of the surface of the volcano is, and we track that over time. So that's kind of the backbone of our research. It's a pretty simple idea. It's not necessarily easy to do in practice because you have to make a lot of corrections for things like tides and oceanographic effects. And so it takes a little bit of work. And then we have other supplementary things that we do as well on top of that.
So looking at that and understanding you're using that ocean pressure, and then to, I guess, probably understand the swell of the volcano as it's coming up, how big is the swell of the volcano right now compared to, say, where it was right after it erupted in 2015? How high has the ocean floor been raised right there?
It can change by 2 to 3 meters.
Yeah, wow. So you're talking 8 to 10 feet from one eruption to the next. So it drops down that much very quickly, over most of it in a day when an eruption's happening. And then over the next decade, say, it's slowly rising back up. So yeah, these are really big changes, which make it easier for us to measure. So that and all of this is giving us information about what's happening under the ground that we can't see, obviously. So we're interested in, where the magma is being stored, how much of it is coming in, at what rate, is it moving around underground in between eruptions, what depth, what's the shape of this magma reservoir. We're collecting all this data to try to give us as much information about what's happening with the magma underground where we can't see it, but this is a way to detect it.
And so looking at how the surface changed, the pattern of uplift and deflation on the surface, we can do numerical modeling to work out some of the details of how the magma is moving around in the subsurface.
And given all of the studying that you've been doing about this, especially over the years and leading up to now where you're seeing it inflate down there, how soon do you think this could erupt?
Well, it has changed with time. So we started doing this forecasting, before 2011 actually, and so we had started to make these measurements, and we were working out the details and how to make the measurements better. And we started with in 2006 we could see it reinflating, and we could tell about where it was in the cycle, and so we started extrapolating into the future. And there was a lot of uncertainty. So at first we started with a really big window that We thought it might be ready to erupt again before 2014, I think we said. So, and then it erupted in 2011. So, okay, that was pretty good. Then right after 2011, the volcano started reinflating really quickly. And the key was that it was very steady. So it was, that made it relatively easier to extrapolate into the future. And so in late 2014, we said we thought it would be ready to erupt sometime in 2015. And then it erupted in April 2015. So that worked. It was like, hey, maybe we can do this. But then since 2015, it's been a lot more difficult. We've made a bunch of forecast, eruption windows before now that were all not correct. So there's some, it's warranted to be a bit skeptical of what we're doing here because, but what happened is that since 2015, the rate of inflation has been very unsteady. So initially it started out high, and then we started extrapolating, but then it kept slowing and slowing, which has moved the time of the eruption further and further in the future. So we've had to repeatedly kind of move our window forward. And in fact, in the summer of 2023, it had slowed to a crawl. So it almost stopped inflating, but it was just barely positive. So at that point, it seemed like it was never going to erupt. And we kind of stopped trying to figure out when, because it was kind of impossible. But then starting last fall, about a year ago, the rate of inflation slowly started to increase. And by last summer, so July 2024, it had gotten back up to 25 centimeters a year, which is about 10 inches a year, something like that. And notably, the number of earthquakes really picked up in 2024. So, suddenly it seemed like, okay, now it really is building back up to the next eruption. Plus the fact that we'd gotten so high in the inflation cycle, in other words, back to that threshold where it erupted in 2015. Yeah, so we decided to make another window, and somehow this one has gotten more attention, and so now we're talking about it. But I'm not 100% convinced it's going to happen in 2023. I'm sorry, in 2025. It just seems like that could happen. So that's our latest forecast. But it could be that we get to this coming summer, and if things have slowed down again, we might have to revise the window again. So we'll just have to see. But for now, we're saying by the end of the year. At the moment, the number of earthquakes aren't as high as I would expect, right before an eruption. So to me, it would have to kind of build back up a little bit more until it's really ready to go. But who knows? It's, it's not a perfect science, and the volcano can kind of do what it wants to do. So,
yeah, so it doesn't necessarily is going to follow your exact.
It's not listening to us, no.
No, that's still though. I mean, just to even get even remotely close. I mean, that's incredible, as you did with those other ones, being able to get all of this data, and that's the learning process of this.
Yeah, especially far in advance. That's really the hard part, because when at volcanoes on land. Once the magma is on its way to the surface, which is, hours to days before an eruption, it's usually making a racket, and we're in places that are monitored, you can tell, okay, something's about to happen. So short-term eruptions are thankfully possible, but it's these longer-term ones, weeks or months or even years in advance, that are really hard to do. And so we're in this one place, we're trying to see if it's possible.
Well, it's been, fascinating just learning about this here over the, for some reason this is getting a lot more attention right now too, your predictions on this. But I mean, learning just about all the tremendous work that you're doing, all of these teams are doing with the regional cable array, and what you've done, and then going out there and sitting an ROV down there. I mean, it's pretty cool to see, and there's a lot of great video of it as well that you have, so people can actually see some of this stuff that you're getting to witness down there. Really, really great. And I appreciate both of you having time to talk to us today too, just about the work.
Sure.
For people who want to find out more, what do you think is the best place for them to go to find out more just about the work that you're doing with Axial Seamount?
Let's see.
Good question.
I threw you on the spot there.
Yeah. We have a blog online that's, I can send you the link and maybe you can put it up somewhere. It's
Absolutely.
Hosted at Oregon State University that kind of follows our attempts to forecast this, the coming eruption. So that's probably a good place to start.
Okay, we'll send people there, and if you guys don't mind, maybe we can check back in with you here as more data comes out over the next few months and see where we're at on the prediction scale and what we found out, if that'd be cool with you guys.
Right, we can talk again in 6 months and see how it's looking. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll have a chart going, seeing how close you are to being correct or not. And
Yeah, right.
let you know before people start making their fantasy bets on it. But
Yeah.
all right, well, good. Bill and Scott, thank you very much for having time to join us here. I really do appreciate it, and really interesting work, and looking forward to finding out more.
Great. Thanks, Greg.
Appreciate it.
Enjoyed the conversation.
Good. And for everybody watching too, thanks for joining us. We are live streaming here at the Fox 12 Oregon Newsroom. As I mentioned, we've covered a couple of different things here on Axial Seamount. So we did talk about the regional cabled array, that whole system down there. We found out a lot about that. You can check out that interview at the Fox 12 Oregon YouTube channel. Just go there under the live tab or the Fox 12 Now tab. You'll find it. It's got a lot of views, a lot of comments on there that some of the questions were addressed by Bill and Scott here in this interview, so it goes back and forth there. But thanks for being a part of this. I appreciate it. I will talk to you soon. I'm Greg Nibbler. This is Fox 12 Now.